Hey, this is Jennifer and Megan. We are two sisters from South Carolina on a mission to discover more about our British grandmother's life in London by reading, researching, and sharing her love letters she wrote during World War II. If you're looking for an interesting, unique perspective on life, love, and London during World War II, then you've found the right place. We will take you through each letter and bring them to life as we have recently traveled to some of the exact places mentioned in these letters. Think of this as a historic love story come to life. So grab your favorite beverage and blanket and prepare to dive in with us. This is the All My Love Lucy podcast. Hey, and welcome back to the All My Love Lucy podcast. It's me, Jennifer, again, and Megan is still not back with us. Hopefully, next week she will be back. And if you'll do me a big favor, if you'll comment somewhere how much you miss her and just bombard her with messages telling her to get herself back here so that I will not be alone. We do miss her, though. I really, really do miss her. I don't like doing this without her. So hopefully next week she's going to be back and back to normal, and we can keep the ball rolling. So also, I want to say thank you for all your love and support every week. I'm just amazed at all the support that we received. I'm grateful to everyone. We both are. If Megan was here, she'd say the same thing. So just want to say thank you. We're having such a wonderful time doing this podcast and learning so much about our grandparents. And we really hope you're enjoying it too. We also want to mention, as always, that if you're a first time listener, this is kind of like a series because we're reading the letters in date order. So you might want to go back and start at episode 1 so that you don't miss any information that we've shared so far, and that we have talked about a lot so far. So you might want to go back and just stop right here. Go back and start with episode 1, and then things will kind of make sense, and you'll get a lot more information. And don't forget, we always have an uninterrupted reading of the letter at the end of each episode, so be sure to stick around for that. And as you can see, our new backdrop is here, and it does have a few of the creases still in it. I really tried to iron it. And I guess it's just going to take time. I tried to iron it, just would not come. They would not come out. And it's the material. I was afraid I was going to melt it. So I didn't leave the heat on it too much. But anyway, so I thought that was just a really pretty backdrop. And so I hope you enjoy it too. But let's get started with letter number 8. And this letter is dated July 5th, 1944. My darling Jimmy, I hope you're quite well and safe. I expect you had loads of fireworks on the 4th. I'm going to stop here and talk about this for a minute because while I'm sure they probably took a little time to celebrate the 4th, the American soldiers, things were very intense in France at this time on this July 4th. And so large scale celebrations or parties or fireworks would not have been possible at this time. There was too much going on. Like I said, I'm sure they may have had smaller tributes to the 4th, but as far as wide scale, they would not have been able to do that. The U.S. soldiers were deeply involved in combat at this particular time, and they were facing heavy losses. In fact, the American soldier casualty numbers were in the thousands during this first part of July. They lost a lot of the American soldiers in a couple of particular battles. So there certainly wouldn't have been the freedom or the time to have a 4th of July party. So that would not have been, when she said you probably had loads of fireworks on the 4th, they would not have. So, but she wouldn't have known exactly what he was doing at the exact time of this letter. She would not have known what they were engaged in exactly at that time. So she goes on to say, well, sweetheart, I cannot think of anything to write about, but I want to put another letter in the post as I know they are held up for some days. And so I guess she just wants to make sure that she gets some sort of communication to him to kind of keep his morale up, let him know she's thinking of him, and that she loves him. It's kind of give him that hope of something to look forward to, and just to know that there's someone out there that is madly in love with him and cares enough to write him as often as she did. I'm sure that's why she did it. She goes on to say, I do not like my new job very much, but I'm trying to make the best of it and expect I shall soon get used to it. Now, as mentioned in a previous episode, Lucy had begun a new job at the Imperial Smelting Corporation. And we don't really know exactly what her job duties were at this company, but she was a stenographer by trade. And so we do get in the next letter, just jumping a little bit ahead, but in the next letter, she gives us a more detailed description of what her daily schedule was like. And one thing she mentions is a side job that she does in the evenings, which would include doing some of her stenographer duties, that type of work. So the next letter is pretty interesting. It talks a little bit more about what she was doing day to day. She goes on to say, Darling, I miss you so very much and long for your company. Your photograph, the one you gave me, is getting very crumpled. What with keeping it under my pillow and kissing you good morning and good night, but you still smile at me, so I think you must like it, even if you do get a little dilapidated. So I thought that was funny. Now, I'm not sure which photo she's referring to here. We do have one that kind of makes me think it might be the one. It's pretty rough. It's a little bit more dilapidated than the other ones. But I'm not, we don't know. Of course, we don't know for sure, but I'll put it up on the screen for you so you can see. He is looking back at her smiling. So that is why I think maybe that might be the one. So she goes on to say, I wish my darling old man were here so I could sit on his knee and show him how much I love him. Blush. Let's keep this PG. But no, seriously, this made me think, and she said that, this makes me think about how she keeps saying she wishes he were with her when she goes to the theater, and she just keeps on saying that. And then I started thinking about the theater, how my brain works. One thing leads to another. Started thinking about the theater, and I have been wondering about the theater. Last week we talked about going to that movie, The Bridge of San Luis Rey, and so I got to thinking about how often she goes to the theater and what the theater situation would have been like during this time, because of all the bombings that were going on, that it just surprised me that the theater is still open and that in operation, that these plays are the live performances are still being put on in London, even during all that was going on. So I took some time to look that up and read about that. And what I read was that in the early stages of the war, like late 30s or 39, 40, 41, sometime around there, especially during the Blitz part, the theaters actually closed down to try to prevent mass civilian casualties, which makes perfect sense. But during this V1 bombing campaign, which was terrible, this happened a few years after the Blitz. I've read several articles about how people were kind of over Hitler ruling their lives, and that they kind of went about their business all while taking precautions. And of course, they would have been afraid and worried and all that. But they kind of went about their lives without, completely shutting down their lives. They did not want to have that sense of giving Hitler the satisfaction of ruling their lives anymore completely. And so they just kind of kept on going. And I read one article that said that they would just kind of, when they would hear the buzzing coming, of course it was scary. Of course they were afraid, but if they were going to work or if they were going wherever, they would just kind of get away from any glass and kind of take shelter, but not completely shut their lives down. And so that's kind of the way it was with the theaters. They had somewhat grown accustomed to the aerial attacks and took on a bolder stance with their daily lives, as that normalcy, maintaining some sort of normalcy, helped them to cope with all the chaos that was going on. And So again, while they were still very much afraid and very much terrorized by these V1 bombs, it was like they just had to push through and keep going and keep living their lives. And again, this is kind of what happened with the theaters. One article I read said that the theaters during this time of the V1 bombings would add notes in the programs that would tell people what to do in case there was an air raid going on. And if an air raid happened during the show, the audiences would be warned that it was happening, that it was going on. They would put up these illuminated signs that would say that there was an air raid and that they were free to leave to take shelter. But they basically told the people that if they decided to leave during the middle of a play or a film, that if they decided to leave, to not do so excitedly and in chaos, but to walk out quietly without disturbing everyone around them, which I thought was so funny. They're like, yeah, you can leave and take shelter from the bomb, but don't disturb the person beside you. But however, it did say most people just decided to stay where they were in the theaters during the air raids and just carry on. I guess it kind of got to the point where if it was going to drop, you're not going to really get out of the theater into a safe place in enough time. So I guess. And so I thought that was amazing and showed once again, we've seen the resilience of the people of London and how they were living their lives. So she goes on to say in the letter, well, darling, I feel very sleepy, so I'm just going to make some cocoa and go to bed, and perhaps I shall see you in my dreams, and then I won't want to wake up. A couple of things here that stuck out to me about this sentence here, the statement. She says she's feeling very sleepy, and as we'll see in the next letter, and she details her daily schedule, she was a busy lady. She had a lot going on and was very busy, including something called fire watching, and we're going to detail that next week. But that has to do with the war and some of the things that the civilians did to help out with the war efforts. And so she didn't get a lot of sleep. She was tired a lot, working, doing all that. And she, like I said, it sounds like she took on a second job in the evenings sometimes. So she was tired. And then what made me laugh is she said, so she's going to make some cocoa. Well, if she put sugar in that, I would think that would kind of keep her awake. But I don't know how she drank it. But I thought it was also interesting here that she says she's going to drink cocoa and go to bed because we haven't really heard her mention drinking cocoa before. She hasn't talked about it before. And like I've said before, if she talks about something, then it's worth at least looking it up to see if there's anything interesting. And sure enough, when I looked it up, I found some pretty neat information about this. Because the consumer goods were scarce during the war, of course, there was the rationing system in place that had to be implemented to help ensure that equal distribution of the basic essentials would be made so that people, as we've recently discovered during a crisis, people can get out of hand toilet paper. Um, we won't talk about, I won't go into that, but we have seen how that can happen when it's not regulated. Uh, After a while, though, I think the store started catching on. Hey, we're going to have to put a limit on the toilet paper. But so going back to the wartime during this letter, consumer goods were scarce, so they had to ration them and the basic essentials, especially. But sweets and chocolate rationing began in July of 1942 and actually lasted through February of 1953. And that was nearly 8 years after the war was over. And the only other food item that took longer than chocolate and sweets to deration was meat. So I did not realize that the rations went on for so long after the war was over. So that was really interesting to me. But to me, this explains why she rarely mentions having cocoa because it was under that ration. But each person would have been allocated a certain number of points per month in the British rationing system, and that would have definitely limited the amount of chocolate that each person could purchase. But not only that, the chocolate was in short supply in general because of its ranking value and the points value, meaning that it wasn't a high priority item. And also, the cocoa trees didn't grow in Britain, so it was an import, and real chocolate would have been hard to come by. And there would have been substitutes and replacements, and some chocolate items would have had fillers. And I found a really interesting story, quick story, about a little girl that got a chocolate bar. She was excited about the chocolate bar, and she opened it and was started to eat it and couldn't. Well, she's going to break it in half. She's going to break a piece off of it. But probably she would break a little piece off each day or something like that. But she started to break a piece off, and it had wood in it in the middle. And so this was done to so that the chocolate bar was still normal sized and the same thickness, same size. But the chocolate would just be around that wood. And so the little girl had to just eat around the wood to get to the chocolate, or just to have the chocolate. But it says that she was glad to have it. Nevertheless, she was glad to have it. But I thought that was an interesting story that they would put wood in the middle to as a filler so that it would look the same. I guess that would just be a psychological trick to think, oh, I have a big chocolate bar, and then you break into it and it's wood in the middle, and you just have a thin layer of chocolate on the outside. Oh, that's sad, but kind of humorous. But despite the shortages and rationing, chocolate still remained a popular treat and was often gifted to others to help boost morale. So, and chocolate still does that today. So most people love chocolate. Some people don't, but so she goes on to say in closing in this letter, won't it be wonderful when one day I do find you really beside me when I wake? If we are patient, that time will soon come round. So, darling, keep smiling and try to be happy, knowing I am waiting and longing to be with you always. We have so much to look forward to, and I'm so proud of my darling. Good night, and God bless you and keep you safe always with all my love from your Lucy. And again, like I was saying before here, I think she's sending him these letters so frequently to keep him encouraged, and these things that she's saying to him. I'm sure when he reads this, it does make him feel better. It makes him feel like he has a reason to keep going and fighting, and whatever he's involved in, that he can just make it one more day. We all know that when people encourage us, it does help us to take that next step forward. And so I think that this is awesome of her to take the time to write him and say these wonderful things to him and encouraging things to him. And before we do our next episode, we're going to come across the 56th anniversary of Jimmy's death. So I wanted to take a minute to recognize that Jimmy died on February 22nd, 1968 at 58 years old, and he had lung cancer and battled with that for a little while. I don't know the exact timing of it. I'm going to find that out and share that with you next time, but I did want to take a moment to recognize that we're coming up on the 56th anniversary of his death, and just to take a minute to talk about that. So we continue on this journey with Lucy as she details her life and her hardships and her longing to be with the love of her life. And we get closer, a little bit closer each time to them being reunited. But I'm loving learning about the details of her life. And like we've told y'all before, we've read some of the letters, but we have not read all of them. So some of the letters are brand new to us, which is exciting. And as we research these and find out more information about Grandma Lucy and Grandpa Jimmy, and finding out the things that were going, what life was like for them, it's very exciting, emotional. It's all kinds of things. But don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. And like I said, next time we're going to learn a little more detail about Lucy's daily schedule, including that fire watching. And I mentioned the fire watching because when Megan and I were in London, we visited St. Paul's Cathedral. I think it's St. Paul's. Yeah. The tour guide was there and he was talking about the people, the civilians who were fire watchers. So we'll have more information on that next time. But that's very interesting. And so we'll talk more about that next time because she does bring that up. So don't miss any of our upcoming episodes as we discover more and more about both of them. And as always, if you don't want to miss any of our upcoming episodes, I know I repeat myself each time about this, but just want to remind you, if you haven't already, to subscribe to our channels, our YouTube, Facebook, follow on Facebook, and Podbean. If you're listening on Podbean, just make sure you're following so you get the little notifications when we upload an episode or whatever. And if you will, hit the like button, leave us some comments and reviews, and share if you want to. All of that helps us, and we really appreciate it. And as I mentioned last time or the time before, we're now answering emails. So don't forget, if you want to ask us a question or make a comment and you want something, we'll read these on our podcast. So if you want to ask a question that you want us to read out loud or make a comment, just send that to allmylovelucy@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to get your questions. And again, thank you for watching this episode. And again, leave a note or a comment for Megan, bombarding her about coming back. Say, please hurry up and come back because I miss her. I know y'all miss her and we really want her back. So, and as promised, we're going to end with an uninterrupted reading of this letter. So until next time, enjoy. July 5th, 1944. My darling Jimmy, I hope you're quite well and safe. I expect you had loads of fireworks on the 4th. Well, sweetheart, I cannot think of anything to write about, but I want to put another letter in the post as I know they are held up for some days. I do not like my new job very much, but I'm trying to make the best of it and expect I shall soon get used to it. Darling, I miss you so very much and long for your company. Your photograph, the one you gave me, is very crumpled, and with keeping it under my pillow and kissing you good morning and good night, but you still smile at me, so I think you must like it, even if you do get a little dilapidated. I wish my darling old man were here so I could sit on his knee and show him how much I love him. Well, darling, I feel very sleepy, so I'm just going to make some cocoa and go to bed, and perhaps I shall see you in my dreams, and then I won't want to wake up. Won't it be wonderful when one day I do find you really beside me when I wake? If we are patient, that time will soon come round. So, darling, keep smiling and try to be happy, knowing I am waiting and longing to be with you always. We have so much to look forward to, and I am so proud of my darling. Good night, and God bless you and keep you safe always. With all my love, from your Lucy. If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We truly hope you enjoyed this episode, and we hope you'll return for the next episode of the All My Love Lucy podcast.